Okay, good evening. Good evening. Holding tonight is Hey of. It is already after Shkia. Ozing on Seisek Chavim. Hey of is the yard site of Rizal. And for me to actually talk about that Rizal is very preposterous. Makes it sound like I have something to say, and I can even understand that Rizal will be like the ants in Ari's backyard giving a josh about Ari, right? But at the end of the day, ultimately, it's not so much what I'm going to say, what I'm going to accomplish, but I feel it's our chiyuv to at least somehow be mizbainin on what the Arizal brought to this world and what we learned from him in our own simple, super simple to the 10th power or 100th power, because ultimately the Arizal brought a message down to the world, a art to the world that was meant to inspire us, to give us an outlook, and ultimately to give us a tremendous amount of joy. That's what the Arizal brought into the world. He brought in a pneumius, he brought an understanding of how, obviously he built on the teachings of Shem Yachai. He made the teachings of Shem Yachai. He expounded on them, expanded them, and he brought them to the forefront of Klal Yisrael's Avodah. It's very interesting how you find, in halacha, brought down in halacha and standard halacha different things from the Arizal, and I can never really understand what the Geda Dvarim is. Like certain things from the Arizal brought down in every simple halacha sefer. The Arizal says this, so we do this, right? And the Arizal is obviously looked as a machriya, and yet the bulk of what the Arizal teaches seems to be looked at as, not for us. So how do you draw the line? What is for us? What's not for us? The Arizal, he ultimately was Ma'aseh Nefesh Mamish for ultimately the Arizal was Ma'aseh Nefesh Mamish to be Megal these sites. This is well known in Arizal that he had certain sites satire that he felt compelled to be Megala, and he knew but that by being Megala these sites satire, this would bring his life to an end. And he said, "Afapike, right? I'm here to bring these Irish into the world." So it's hard for me to be mad there. He's Hanhagas Ha'olam. And so where do you draw the line in connecting to the Torah of the Arizal and the different ideas that he brought into the world? Where do you draw the line? I mean, obviously, ish kafi yachalta, but we have to somehow at least try to have some sort of negia, the tremendous lessons and the iris that the Arizal brought down to this world. So I was thinking that this time of the year is a time of contemplation of the whole Tachlis Abriya, and thinking about Churban is something that sort of can derail someone from their Avodas Hashem, because we like to think that our Avodas Hashem is something that is so bright and happy and it always goes well, and Churban seems to be something that is the direct opposite of that feeling. It's a sense of failure, and you're not going to make it. Chas v'shalom, bad things are going to happen, and Ilu, our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been diminished, and all this is true. There is a diminishing of Churban. There's a tremendous amount of avelus in Churban. There's a tremendous amount of sadness and disconnect. However, when looked a little bit more pneumistic, right? So a person has a game plan based on the pneumis, meaning Chorban seems to be very random. There seems to be just the whole Klal Yisrael gets wiped out. The whole base Hamikdash gets destroyed. It just seems to be so total, so comprehensive, and it just seems to be without any basic cheshbon. Now Rizal explains to us. I just opened the Shar Kavanis just looking for ideas what to talk about a little bit. In Shar Kavanis, in the very beginning, he describes to us, and I'm not sure why this is his first Hakdama at the beginning of Tefillah, but he says Hakdama Achas Be'inyan Tzaris HaMashiach, which is the matzah that we're in now, the Tzaris of Bein HaMitzarim of in our waiting for the arrival of Mashiach. And he says that a person has to know that every ounce of suffering by every person is literally exact. And even though you would say, like, how could it be exact, right? But he says the tikkunim of the Galus and the tikkunim of Chorban was for every chet that had gone on in the 500 previous years, that was getting its tikkun at that point. He says, how could that be? The people that killed Zechariah, Hanavi, they died many years earlier. But Arisa, yeah, they died, but they came back. And HaKadosh Baruch is excited of everything that when Chorban happens, every chisaron, every kilkel that was made by anybody comes back and it gets rectified at that point. All scores get settled. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Chorban. And Mela, this is something to look at, that a Chorban is a clean slate. And a Chorban ultimately is Klal Yisrael's restart. It's a reset. It's not a Kadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyach getting, okay, that's the straw that broke the camel's back, and now Kadosh Baruch Hu takes out his punishment, without any cheshbon. Now there are Chazal Kivushinit Rishus Lahashkas, which we'll leave that on the side for now. But ultimately, this is a message of the Arizal, tremendous sense of emunah, tremendous sense of understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and supplying mechanics to it, supplying the mechanics and understanding of how we can wrap our head around these ideas of emunah. Someone just told me recently that he heard someone commenting, like Arizal says, or he was actually commenting on the Rav Chaim Volozhin, and Nefesh Chaim says when we do a mitzvah, it's boinay lamois, chas v'shalom, the person doesn't have eira, it's machravay lamois, and his comment was like, what's in the gear to me? Machravay olam, boinay olam, right? At the end of the day, does Hashem want me to do it? I do it. Hashem doesn't want me to do it. I don't do it. So what's the idea of this inside peak of an aver being machravay olam, chas v'shalom, and a mitzvah being boinay lamois? So I told my son, I said, that's a very silly statement, because ultimately Avodas Hashem is being misbinding. You have to contemplate, and a person could say, "Oh, I'm so double." Hashem says do a mitzvah, I do it. Hashem says don't do it, and I don't do it. But that's not reality. Reality is the person has to have what to be misbinding about. And when you're supplied with all the details of the Chelkei Abriya, and how Yahweh connects to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how Yahweh is Beinay Lamas, and how Chas V'Shalom Echet Kal is Machiv Harbe Yosim Mashich and the Nebuchadnezzar V'Titas, that you actually appreciate these ideas. Now you have whole ideas to be misbinding about, and his binding ultimately is what's going to bring us to our shleimus. And just saying, oh, I'm simply so naturally showing. Hashem says do it, I do it. Hashem says don't do it, I don't do it. It's just very far from the reality, as we know from the Ramchal, that the person's entire growth is going to be zero if he does not have his blindness in every level. And the way that Arizal gets us to think and view the world is an olam chadash based on all the ideas that he's given us. In his Hakdama to Tefillah, he also tells us that Tefillah has to be done with Simcha. Lashon is the Lashon that Chaim Tal brings down over here in the beginning of Shar Kavanos. Tia b'simcha yiseira v'gedayla b'chol ha'efshem. Gedimyon ha'eved ha'mishamish rabbi b'simcha yiseira. Right? You're an eved. You're doing a job for your billionaire master, and this job, is going to get you the Lamborghini that you wanted. You're very excited about this Avodah, right? So that Rizal says the first snai in Avodah Hashem is that we serve Hashem b'simcha, and he says on the flip side, also la'adam l'spalo tfilosu b'itzavay. It's also to daven if you're feeling atzvus. The first person is feeling down. If you do anything, if you do your avodas Hashem b'tzavay, ein nafshi yochel kabel ha'or elyon hanimshach Allah beis atfila. He says you're not going to connect, right? We could say from we all know the Gemara in Shechina Shayel El B'Teich Simcha, but he's saying that avodas hatfila has to be done with a sense of appreciation of what this tefillah is bringing us. So I just want to maybe just talk a little bit about what is a derech for us to really truly appreciate the fact that we have the ability to daven the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and how to understand that davening is a tachas in itself, and the hashpa'is at davening are natural outgrowth of the ma'isa tefillah, right? In avodas hapnimis, right, the result is always the ma'isa itself. There's no period in emes. Right? Everything's connected. If the ma'isa is a ma'isa of standing in front of Hashem and being mevakash yitzrachim, so then the result is built in, right? When you do the ma'isa properly, the result is exactly the ma'isa that you did. The avodah is to do the avodah in a way that it brings about the result that you want. Ultimately, tefillah is for us to have a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and appreciate all his hatava. The ma'isa tefillah is, the way that Rizal is describing, is feeling the hatava in your amid b'fanav. Right? The ma'isa tefillah is standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and understanding this is the greatest hatava that I can stand in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the sense of hatava, the sense of goodness in your davening is expressed emotionally with a tremendous simcha in the davening.
So why don't we only daven in a sense where we say Hashem's shevach, and we say how great he is, but then leave out what we want, because what we want might not be good for us, and anyway Hashem knows what we need. So instead of not davening at all, we just connect to Hashem by the fact that Hashem is everything, and then you do what you think is right.
Right. Well, part of the way of connecting to Hashem's everything is you have bakashas that you recognize that Hashem, you're everything when it comes to my das, you're everything when it comes to my tshuva. And it's not per se saying, okay, give me das to be an engineer or to be the smartest scientist. And it's not per se say Baruch Alein, I want a Lamborghini, right? It's really what it is. It's expressing your total dependence on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? So the bakashas ultimately is an expression of your total dependence on Hashem more than describing exactly what you want. It's like more than giving a wish list to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Also, right? Davening is a person davening for Klal Yisrael. It's not only about me, right? So it's in a general sense, right? The Welt needs das, the Welt needs tshuva, the Welt needs parnasa, the Welt needs geula, right? The Welt needs refuah. So it's davening in its purest term when you really connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is his outlook. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's outlook is, yes, you're very important to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but you're part of a very big picture. Right? So ultimately, davening is davening for the ganze Welt, right? And you feeling the responsibility to daven for the whole Welt. Which really brings us to the next nakuda that the Arizal says over here, that a person, before he starts davening, has to mekabel on himself the mitzvah of haftu l'reacha kamaycha, right? Because that's what it means to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't mean connecting to me as an individual with my selfish desires. Connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu means connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is connectable. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is connectable to Klal Yisrael through Klal Yisrael. So you really want to be part of the bigger picture. You want to impact Hashem's world. Hashem's world sees you as being an emissary for the God's Klal Yisrael. So you better understand that that's what you are and have an appreciation that you get to represent Klal Yisrael. I once had a Maisa a number of years ago that I probably said this in a share not that long ago, but it was my first Shachris upstate in the summer, the Satmar base Medish in Monticello. and I'd been going there for many years. So on the first day of the summer, right, they had over there two of the rabbanim of the colony, they're Dayanim of the colony, and I was friendly with them already from previous summers. So when you see them on the first day, you go say hello, but it was before Shachris, and I felt a little bit funny, going before Shachris to say hello. You're not supposed to start, boozing and saying hello before Shachris. And he was across the room, but he comes over to me and he says, "Shalom Aleichem, how are you?" So he saw I was like a little bit uneasy before Shachris, saying hello. So he tells me, I'll tell you, I'm Isa. He says, Rab Daniel Frisch, the author of the Mosik Midrash, was in Switzerland by the Rebbe of Yankel of Chaversk. He went to visit the Rebbe of Yankel of Chaversk. He was a big Rebbe in Switzerland. And he was there. He got to the base Spanish before Shachris. And the Rebbe comes over to the Shalom Aleichem. He says, "Give me a warm Shalom Aleichem." And he was also a little bit like unnerved before Shachris. It's now really a time for Shalom Aleichem. Like he didn't really know how to respond. You have to open up the Shabbat to see how can I respond now. And so the Rebbe told him, he says, State Arizal says that before davening, you have to do kabbalah on yourself the mitzvah of hafal recha kamaycha. He says, I'm coming over to you as a chana for tefillah. This is the way I'm preparing myself for davening. I'm not coming to schmooze. I'm not coming to greet you. I'm coming as a chana for my tefillah. This is the most important chana for tefillah, to really look at every yid and feel the sense of connection, because ultimately Klal Yisrael connects HaKadosh Baruch Hu and tefillah by making a yichud k'tevichud shchintei. What's shchina? Shchina is Knesset Yisrael. Klal Yisrael in its entirety is shchina. And when we come as a chelik of Shechina, then we make this ultimate connection of Kutchavicha Shechinte, which brings down a tremendous hashpah. What ultimately gives us the ability of being super excited about davening, right? What are people excited about? People are excited about potential. People are excited about, right? Wow, this is so much to gain from this. That's what makes people excited, right? Some people are very small-minded and they think there's so much to gain from very small things. You give a kid an ice cream cone. Wow, there's so much to gain from this. I'm going to enjoy every lick, right? This ice cream cone, I'm going to eat it slowly over the next half hour, and then I'm going to bite a little hole in the bottom of the cone, and then I'm going to slowly suck out the ice cream, and then I'm slowly going to eat this. And it's like the potential of this is like so exciting. Right, but the bigger you are, right, what brings simcha is greater potential. What's the greatest potential in the world? What's the greatest potential in the world? The greatest potential in the world is for you, little person, right, in Olam Hazeh, to accomplish the Tachlis Habriya. Right? If I could tell you, you're the guy, right? You're the one that's going to take this whole world, lift it up, and make something happen special that the whole world's going to celebrate forever and ever, right? That's pretty exciting, right? It's more exciting than an ice cream cone, even more exciting than the Lamborghini that some of us dream about, right? What's tefillah? Tefillah is that potential, right? Tefillah is that every tefillah that a yid davens, a yid has to feel that this tefillah can make the difference. This tefillah is going to make such a strong connection. I'm going to have the schutz of making such a powerful connection that this is going to turn the tide, and this is all of a sudden it's going to be a shofar blast as soon as I say Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avram. Right? That's a sense of what tefillah is. It's such a potential that I'm literally standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, representing Klal Yisrael, right, with my own unique looking inside of myself and with my deep emotions, standing mamash from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is a sense of potential that every yid has to have in his davening. And that's a tremendous simcha. Wow, I think this is going to be great. I know I'm going to accomplish something great. And whether I'm going to hear the shofar blast or not, I know what I accomplished is bringing us one, two, or many steps closer. This idea of a yid's ability to affect the world and to affect Kaviyachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu's matziv in this world is ultimately what gives Klal Yisrael. This is what Klal Yisrael is. What do I mean to say? Let's look at Galus. What is Galus? Galus is Kaviyachal, actually not Kaviyachal. Galus is Lemaisa, one big Chil Hashem. Kvayt Shemayim is mamish lamata. Lashon of Svarim is Shchinta is bali ba'afra. Right? The Kaviyach, the Shchin is rolling in the mud. Right? That means HaKadosh Baruch Hu is rolling in the mud. Kaviyach. Right? When we say the kinnis and it says Oz but when Yirmiyahu was outside Yerushalayim and he came across the Shechina that was described as an Isha that was mamish that looked like a Isha misabelas, right? This is what where the Shechina is holding, which means Kvayt Shemayim, which is Shechina. When we say Kvayt Shemayim, we talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's representation in this world, which is unfortunately very diminished nowadays. This is literally the tachlis of Klal Yisrael, especially in this man. When in this man where we recognize we're mizbainin dafka on how Yerud and how Lamashal lowly, right, the Shechina has been placed in this world. This is our avodah in today's day, in this time of the year. The fact that Klal Yisrael has the ability of raising Kvayt Shemayim, or that HaKadosh Baruch Hu even created a world that there's this inyan of Kvayt Shemayim, right? Meaning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need anything, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need us, and us giving cover to HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be equivalent to an orchestra of ants, performing in Ari Rasa's backyard in celebration of Ari's greatness, right? What do I care, right? I can tell you right now, Ari, there's a million ants in your backyard, and they're all the spoil from your woodwork, and they talk about it all day. And there's literally, they have a Twitter account with the Rosner, woodworking factory, and there is a world full of ants that think you're unbelievable. You happy, right? Okay. I'm not even talking about the mosquito larvae, what's going on in their minds, right? You have a tremendous fan club, and they're doing all sorts of things to be marble your covered, right? What's the answer? The answer is it doesn't matter, right? They're ants. Well, us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are much further than ants, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a world, and he said, you know what? You could give me covet. I'm going to take my covet and put it in your hands. The Vilna Gaon says, Tachas Abriya is Toiv Yotzar, Kavod Lishmoi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's Tachas HaToiv, he made a world that covered Lishmoi, that we could give covet to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when we're davening, this is ultimately what we're doing. We're coming to give covet to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means to take the matzah of where HaKadosh Baruch Hu has lack of covet, and by standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and being Meshabech HaKadosh Baruch Hu and going through that way to Tefillah, we're bringing tremendous covet to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm just going to say a kavana that I think is a very powerful kavana. I've mentioned it. I don't know if I mentioned it in the shir, but definitely not in the Tefillah series. We have in Shemona Esrei, we have 4 times that we bow in Shemona Esrei. And the kavana when you bow in Shemona Esrei is brought down. I assume the Arizal brings it down. Yeah, the Arizal brings the Shar Kavanis, but it's actually Tikkunei Zohar taking the test. And it says the kavana when you bow down by the 4 times in the Shemona Esrei is there are 4 times you bow, the 4 letters in Shem Hashem. Right? Shem Hashem is Yud Kei Vav Kei. And the 4 letters in the Shem of Hashem, the way we say it, Aleph Daled and Nun and Yud. The kavana when you bow is as follows. Right? Shem Aleph Daled is connected to Shechina. The Shechina is lamata. The Shechina needs to be lifted up. The Shechina is lemashal down and out. Arava is to lift the Shechina up, and the kavana of the bowing down is that when by the first bow, Baruch Atah Hashem, when you say Baruch Atah Hashem and you stand up, you say Shem Hashem. The kavana is that Yud Kei Vav Kei should pick up the Shechina. That we in Kaviyach inspire HaKadosh Baruch Hu to pick up the Shechina from its avelus, from the offer. So by the first kriya, the yud is bows towards the aleph and lifts up the aleph. By the second, by Magen Avram, Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avram, Hey of the Yud Kei Vav Kei picks up the Dalet. By Moedim, the Vav picks up the Nun, and by Hatayv Shimcha, the Hey Achroina of Havaya picks up the Yud of Adna. So we have by the four Kriyas of Ishtachavayos that we are inspiring with our avodah the ability for the Kaviyachal, the ability for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to pick up the Shechina and ultimately pick up Klal Yisrael, bringing Geula. And you recognize that, wow, what a power I have, right? What a power I have that I could do something so unbelievable, something so great, right? Which again, like we described, that from the Vilna Gaon, Taiv Yatzar Kavod Lishmai, the aggressive type of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that he created a God that we can give cover to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now we understand, you have a new understanding when you just bow down to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you restarted the process, and you say, Gaimel Chasadim Taivim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the greatest chesed, right? Gaimel Chasadim Taivim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the greatest chesed, right? What's the greatest chesed? The greatest chesed is Taiv Yatzah Kavod Lishmai, that we could give cover to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I can sit over here and bow to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and inspire a connection that is going to bring covet to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and literally lift the Shechina from the offer and help bring the Geula. This is a tremendous, a person feels, wow, I cannot believe that I'm so important. I've been wired into the Bria. I've been wired into Hashem's world to make such a difference. And this is the ultimate simcha when a person realizes that what I do is very valuable. And this is a kavanah, which I will repeat for the island what the kavanah is. Again, we have four letters in Hashem's name, the way Hashem's name is written, Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the way we say it, Aleph Dalet. Right? Yud Kei Vav Kei is Kodesh Baruch Hu, that's a Kodesh Baruch Hu, uplim in Shemayim, the Maila. Aleph Dalet, the way we say it is a Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Shechina in Olam Hazeh. Shechina in Olam Hazeh is in a very Kaviyachal Yerud Matziv, a Matziv of Avelus, a Matziv of Nefila, right? A matziv of Shechita is Ba'afra, right? In Chorban, right? The Shechina is what experiences Chorban, right? The Shechina is what leaves the bias, right? Which leaves the Beis Hamikdash. The Shechina is what rests in the Beis Hamikdash and had its bias destroyed, right? And so again, Havaya is HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'mayla, that he's a L'mayla from Chorban. The Chorban is personified in Shechina, and the kavanah of the Kriya of the bowing down is that the Shem Hashem, Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, lifts up the Shem Aleph Dalet, and in every one of the bows, one letter lifts up the other letter. The Yud of Havaya picks up the Aleph of Adna by the first Kriya. When you bow down, you picture the Yud is bowing towards the Aleph, and then it's lifting the Aleph up. When you bow down by Magen Avram, Baruch Atah Hashem, the Hey is bowing towards the Dalet and lifting it up. And then so too with the Vav, and the Nun lifts up the Nun, and the Yud lifts up, and the Hey Achron lifts up the Yud. And that's the Kavanah. And the Tikkun says something, the Tikkun Zohar says something amazing. It says, if you don't have this Kavanah, you're responsible for not bringing about the tremendous tikkun that you were meant to bring about, right? The pasuk in Eicha says, "Nesanani Aleph Dalid Bidei Layuchakum," that you who have the ability of picking up Aleph Shem Aleph Dalid, picking up Shechina from Afar, and you don't, right? So it's like you're not allowing me to stand. You're supposed to help me get up by your davening, by davening. Every year is responsible of making this tikkun, and when you don't, there's a time that we're contributing to the chesaron of the Shechina, the difficulty, the suffering of the Shechina in Olam Hazeh. When a person recognizes that you have such a power, to me that's the greatest goymel chasad taivim, right? Like we said over from the goyim, this is what taiv is. Taiv yatsa kavod lishmai. The greatest midas hachesed Kadosh Baruch Hu is that he made a velt and he connected us. We're actually have an ability to affect Kadosh Baruch Hu himself, Kaviyachal. And these are ideas that are obviously expanded in the greatest detail by the Arizal. And this is something that I thought would be appropriate diburim for tonight's call this tefillah shir, the cover the yahrzeit of Rabbeinu Arizal, which talk about zeicha to serve Hashem b'simcha, zeicha to have a backdrop of Avas Yisrael in all our mitzvahs and all our tefillahs, And with this, we're talking about Zeicha to the binyan based on Migdash, Hera Biyameinu. I put enough for this.
Amen.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Rabbi, how does that overlap with Eke?
yeah.
I think you mentioned that one time.
As it overlap, well, Eke is the Maila, yeah. That is part of the Yichud, right? Eke Havaya Adna, which is 112. But that is part of the mix. There is an Eke Havaya also in that mix. But I didn't get
So which way does it go? You put it after.
Eka's on top, generally. Eka Havaya and Havaya Adna.
So it would be, so the first one, let's say, would be, Aleph, then Yud, and then
Right.
Aleph.
Yeah.
But is that but the main one is
We spoke about tomorrow. Yeah, we went through that once upon a time. Yeah, but this is they actually are both brought down.
Mm-hmm.
To do both, right? So the Eka with Havaya and Havaya with Adna. They are both brought down. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Would you say we should do it straight the three together, or the two is the main one, the Yud and the Aleph?
I don't know if you do it as three, but you may do it as two pairs.
So let's say you would do it.
Aleph to Yud and then Yud. Yeah.
The first Eke Havaya and then Havaya Adna. Okay. That much Shmones is going to get that much longer.
Yeah, well, listen. Once you plug in by Shemini Esrei, why would you want to leave?
Yeah.
Where are you running?
Yeah, not
Is there a better place to be?
No.
Okay. So if you're on vacation, like some people I know, well, you might as well check it the Shemini Esrei for like an hour or two. Like, why not?
Not rushing anywhere.
Yeah.
Ari, by the way, you could always catch his Cyrus minion like you wanted, like with that delayed by Yechal, like Shomer Shabbos has them.
It's a good hour walk in each direction for me.
Whatever you could drive.
Yeah.
Rabbi.
Fine. Okay. Yes.
Rabbi. Hello?
Yeah, I hear you.
Did you see what I sent you? Did Arizal say that with the Erev Yom Kippur? Do you have a chance to see that?
I didn't see it.
Arab Rosh Hashanah that you said?
Erev Yom Kippur, what eating and Erev Yom Kippur has been sacking all the machals. It makes sense. I've heard it. I don't know if it's Arizal per se. It makes sense. Yeah.
Sounds Hasidish.
So yes, you think it's they say that Arizal said it.
Okay, I mean, you could look in the around Yom Kippur if it's there. It'll be in the Kavanas of Erev Yom Kippur.
I think Panine Halachis. I think they said it. Does that make sense?
Probably not. I mean, that could be some sort of likud safer for it. But if you want to find it in the source, you have to open up Kavanas to create Chaim.
So I guess if Rebbe has a chance.
Okay, and I didn't bring I didn't bring too many of the Kisaria. I think I just brought the Kavanas. I'll look at the Kavanas when I get a chance. Okay.
I'll speak to Rebbe tomorrow.
Come back, Rebbe. We'll miss you.
Good night, Rabbi.
Okay, I got the Shkach Ari, Shkach B'Borei Simcha, Shkach Eli.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Yoshida.
which, by the way, if you didn't read the title, is a walnut console table. So I needed to mill up some 8/4, some 4/4. I did that, and then I stacked and stickered it, let it sit for a week almost and acclimate. And during our review of the plans, Lola just completely lost interest. So once the wood was nicely acclimated to my environment, I milled it down to final dimension, the legs to 2 inches and the remainder to 3/4 of an inch. Now the first step was to make a template for the legs, and since they splay out at 5 degrees, I took a scrap piece of plywood and cut each end at that 5 degrees. Now I start my taper 2 inches down from the top, and then it's 2 inches wide, tapering down to 1 1/4 inch at the bottom. I use my setup blocks to avoid any mismeasurements, and then I use a long straight edge to connect those points. And head over to the table saw where my tapering jig was anxiously awaiting. Now, I made this jig a long time ago. It's a direct replica of the Rockler version. I just found it easier to make my own because I had the jig parts laying around. Okay, before we make any cuts, let's talk about grain selection for our legs. She got legs. Okay, here we have what's called quarter sawn, where the grain runs vertical from face to face, which produces a nice straight grain on those faces, but on the adjacent sides, not so much. Now on this piece, which is actually flat sawn because it's sawn flat across the grain, what we have hidden in here is what's called rift sawn, where the grain runs at an angle, preferably 45 from face to face. So if we were to rip this here and here, what we have is 2 rift sawn pieces where the grain is hitting 2 adjacent surfaces on each growth ring. And what that produces is a nice straight grain on this side, a nice straight grain on the opposite side, and also on the adjacent sides. Here's another good example of that, where the grain is running at roughly a 45-degree angle, and what we have is nice straight grain on all 4 surfaces. All right, enough chatter. Let's cut some legs. So I'm ripping these a little bit wider than I need because they're going to be tapered on the table saw anyway. Oh, hey, Jerry. Welcome aboard. Then I use my template that I made to find the best appealing grain match and try to eliminate any imperfections in the wood where I can. And as we did to our template, I'm cutting the top and the bottom of each leg to 5 degrees. Set up a nice little stop block there. Make sure they're all consistent. Then give a quick test just to make sure they're all cut to the right angle. And I think we're good. Now, should I taper these first or kind of do all my joinery and then taper later? After much consternation and a refreshing lime LaCroix, I decided to taper them later. That way I always have 2 square parallel reference surfaces on my legs when doing the joinery. And speaking of joinery, let's cut some angled bridle joints. Now I am using a tenoning jig here on the table saw. Now if you don't have a tenoning jig, you can easily make your own. I'm going to put a link above to my friend Tamar over at 3x3 Custom, who makes one, and she has a tutorial on her website on how to build it. Now, once I establish the inner and outer cheek of the female part of the bridle, I chew away the waist, and then, as you can see, I still have some tear out, even with the tape there, but no worries. The other half of the bridle joint will cover that. Oh, and it looks like we're moving right on to the other part of that bridle joint. So here are the long stretchers, front and back. These are 3/4 inch, and they're 46 inches long. So I'm raising my table saw blade to 1/8 of an inch. And as you can see, I'm just using my little Jessam guide there as a stop block. But the kicker here is my miter gauge is set to 5 degrees because the angled legs are going to slide into this here. So once I do one side, I'll kind of chew away that waist. And I can't just flip this over and do the other because I'm going to have to turn that miter gauge 5 degrees the other way. So after a test fit, just making a little shave on that. And that fits nice. So now I can finish up the other end. And then, as I mentioned, turn the miter gauge 5 degrees in the other direction and do the same thing over again. And there you have it. Now, I did leave the depth on these a little shallow on the table saw because I knew I was going to come back here and smooth these out with the router. I love using this tool for fine-tuning these joints. Quick little test fit, and that's nice. It slides in with a little bit of effort. It comes apart the same. Now we can remove the waist on the table saw in this area so that this joint slides together nicely. This will also cover the tear out on the legs that we experienced a little while back when we were cutting those on the table saw. Now remember, since this angled bridle joint is at 5 degrees, I didn't want to angle my table saw blade at 5 degrees to match it, so I just went in there with a nice sharp chisel and cleaned that shoulder up. And a quick dry assembly here confirms that we're on the right track. And now it was time to cut our legs. I loaded this bad boy up in the tapering jig. To be honest, this is always a little bit scary because we've done some joinery. We don't have any other spare parts. So it is with a little bit of trepidation we make these cuts. But they all came out nice and consistent, which is what's great when working with a well-built and accurate jig like this. Then I just cleaned up those saw marks with a card scraper. This could also be done with a bench plane of your choice. Now I can lay out for the end detail on these front and rear stretchers. It starts 1/4 of an inch in from the bridle joint and tapers up to 3/4 of an inch from the top edge. I head over to the bandsaw to make this cut, just seemed like the easiest thing to do. And then I could grab a block plane to remove all those saw marks. A lot of saw marks, apparently. Nice and smooth. Now for this first glue up, I'm using old brown glue, which is basically hide glue with a little bit urea in it that extends the open time. Now I decided to use this glue because it's not water-based and won't swell these joints. I already had a nice snug fit on these, and I was afraid that putting any PVA glue on it would swell it, and then I may have difficulty putting it together. Now this glue does need to be warmed before using it to make it less viscous, so I just put it in a pot of water on the stove, get it nice and loosey-goosey, and I could clamp these up. And while those are in the clamps, let's clean up the waste. You can see I'm using a paring block here, which helps keep my chisel vertical when cleaning those walls. And I could tidy up the ends with my mortising chisel. And just a note, ideally you want to cut your mortises first and then cut your tenons to fit. Now I'm using a 1/2 inch setup block here just to confirm everything is nice and square. And then I head to the table saw where I can work on the tenons. I'm using my table saw sled and a stop block here. The stop block establishes my shoulder, and then I'm using this technique where you drag the piece across the blade back and forth to remove the rest of the waste. Now, this is a perfectly safe method, but I also understand that a lot of people may not feel comfortable with this. So if you don't, no big deal. You can just make repeated passes back and forth across the blade as we did with the bridle joint. So I do the same thing on the top and the bottom of the tenon. And there you have it, a pair of twins. Wait, no, twins denotes pair. So twins, and router plane for the win to clean up any saw marks. Now I could move on to these top little stretcher supports. I cut them to length on the table saw. Now I'm using the domino on these for speed and efficiency. I showed you how I did the mortise and tenon earlier, so now it's time to hit the gas and get these done. At the same time, I can work on these stretchers that will support the bottom shelf. So same process, domino into the end grain, and then also into the leg. And then the ever satisfying dry fit to make sure everything is coming together. And yeah, nothing looks out of whack. There's a little shuka for Lola. Now, since the face of these stretchers are parallel with the outside of the leg, which is 5 degrees, the top and bottom edges need to be cut to that 5 degrees so that the shelf sits flat on it, like so. Now, to measure for the long stretcher, which connects the 2 outer stretchers, I'm using relative dimensioning. So I'm basically taking my workpiece, putting it up there, marking it, cutting it, and then also firing up the domino again to cut those mortises. And while I do another quick dry fit to make sure all parts harmonize, I wanted to mention, if you're interested in building a walnut console table of your own, plans are available in the description below. One change you'll notice if you purchase the plans is there's only 1 middle stretcher on the top instead of 2. I decided after that it just wasn't necessary to have that additional one. Now this here is what you call a design on the fly change. I decided to add some decorative little brackets to hold up that bottom shelf across the bottom stretcher. Quick test fit reveals we're good to go. And these blocks are 1 inch by 3/4 by 5 inches long. I do a pilot hole just to secure my position, and then head to the bandsaw just to create a nice little bevel across the bottom there. Then I can glue these in place. And now I have integral mounting brackets to secure the bottom shelf. Oh, remember that design on the fly thing I mentioned earlier? Yeah, same thing here. I decided after I had assembled it, so I wanted to put a 1/8 of an inch round over on all my parts just to soften those edges. So with the router, I did that, but I couldn't quite get into certain areas. So with a chisel and some sandpaper, I was able to finish that profile. And then I just started sanding. All these little stretchers needed to be surface prepped before glue up. And I was able to use my noggin here and round over these parts before glue up, save myself the heartache and trouble later. All right, we get the idea. And the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, wait, only 6. All right, so I didn't show me gluing up this bottom shelf because, I mean, seriously, how many glue ups do you need to see? Well, I mean, how much sanding do you need to see? But anyway, glued up, sanded, and now I'm putting a little chamfer profile on each end. I make multiple passes with the router, and I also have a sacrificial clamped onto the end to prevent any tear out. It's more sanding with this thing called the prepping weapon. The shelf mounting holes on the 2 end stretchers is a 2-step process using a Forstner bit and then a regular size bit to create a stepped hole. And this is also enlarged to allow for wood movement. Now I like to work in sub-assemblies when I can because it makes the final glue up less stressful. And you really only need to put this in the clamps for like an hour to make sure that's pretty secure, and then you can move on to clamping everything else. You can see I had to put some 5-degree clamping blocks in there to make sure I had even pressure across the joint. And then it was time to turn on the afterburners and glue up everything. I wanted to quickly mention, for those of you that don't know, as of January 1st, building furniture and creating content for YouTube and other social media platforms is now my full-time job. So if you're interested in supporting me to help keep the cameras rolling and bringing you as much content as I can, I've started a Patreon account where you can toss something in the tip jar if you're so inclined. And honestly, folks, there's no pressure at all. So thanks for listening. And more importantly, thanks for watching. The next day, I could pull this out of the clamps. I did all my necessary surface prep, including glue squeeze out and sanding, and then it was time to apply the Rubio Monocoat. I'm using their color Pure with just a drop of black in it, which helps to mute down that amber tone just a little bit, I think. So I apply it with a white Scotch-Brite pad, rubbing the oil on every surface, and then after 10 or 15 minutes, I wipe off all the excess with a microfiber, and then all surfaces are dry to the touch. Then I put it on the drying rack. Enjoy a celebratory LaCroix. Now, since the top of this table is actually 1 1/4 inch thick marble supplied by the client, things get a little squirrely on how to attach it. I don't like drilling into marble or any stone just in case I ruin it, or just in case I want to use it for another application down the road. So I'm making these little stop blocks that I can adhere to the bottom of the marble using masking tape and CA glue, which will be a very strong connection, but also easily removable without damaging anything. And how about some integrated floor levelers? I'm using standard issue floor levelers from Home Depot. They are 1 inch wide. I like to recess them in the bottom leg just to make them a little less obtrusive. So once I drill my holes, make sure I cover that with Rubio to seal everything. And then I don't use the supplied insert it comes with because it's plastic. So I put in my own 1/4-20 inserts. There you have it. Now I can attach the shelf and get this thing ready for delivery. I left a 1/16 of an inch gap between the shelf and the legs to allow for wood movement. Now this bottom shelf, if you remember, is 2 pieces of 1x glued together. So I'm putting a screw in on each side, and that will be my anchor point, which will allow expansion and contraction outward from there, because the holes on my end stretchers that go up into the shelf have elongated holes. Okay, now we're on site and installing those little lock blocks. I'm using some CA glue and green tape to secure them to the marble. And I can just cut away that excess tape. Then we can stand her up, slide it into place, and drop that marble on top, lock it in. And there you have it, a modern walnut console table with a marble top. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be alerted of any of my future projects. And maybe go check out the other 2 videos in this walnut and marble series, which I will put at the end of this video. And until next time, have fun in the shop and keep building.
Okay, so welcome into the shop. It's great to have you all here. Very excited about this build. Real quick, just getting into this. I filmed this a while back, this bench seat, before we painted the RDC. It was a while ago when I filmed this. I wait to post the video until I had the nice veneer panel done, which I finished last week. Now, this build is comprised of 3 main components: a frame, which is the start of this video, the seat area, which is the bench seat, and then the curved back